So this morning we're looking at living the law. For quite a few years, most of my adult years, which are more than a few, we've lived in a society where authority has been almost rejected, and that started about the time I was born, and it got only worse as I became a young adult and an adult. They did not respect laws, they did not respect those in authority, and they did not respect even their parents and teachers and things like that. And today we're going to look at, as I said up front, some laws written in the Bible that are an extension of the Ten Commandments. And why do I put it that way? Does anyone, the Ten Commandments are what? Can you tell me? About?
Representatives of God.
They're a representation of God, His character. They are the foundation of life and laws and our behavior, right? The foundation. So when I was in a classroom, every year I didn't have all the same laws. Well, I did kind of have the same laws, but in the individual small issues, they weren't always the same. Why? Sometimes I had kids with different issues, so I had to make different laws, right? So, but my foundation for the laws that when I taught was respect God or love God, respect others and yourself, and respect others' things. That doesn't sound like very many laws, does it? So when you think about it, God made how many laws that we call the 10 Commandments or the 10 words? Well, I just told you, He made 10 of them, right? That's really not very many as you consider our life, is it? But they are the basis of every rule or law that we might come up with, because they express God's character, His love, right? Exodus 20, verses 22 and 23 says this. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make anything to be with me, gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for yourselves." That's pretty clear, isn't it? We are to worship God and God alone, not objects that represent. For Him there is no copy, is there? There is no mirror that would reflect Him totally. We are to mirror Him. I read this, caught my attention, and I read it up there this morning. In any culture, the laws reveal the ideals, goals, intent, and character of the lawmaker. That's what the 10 Commandments do. So, as we look around the world, and you look at different countries, their forms of government, can you see a difference in the countries? Yeah. And in that, it's the man who comes into rule that often makes the biggest changes when they are made. So, let's begin talking about the code of the covenant. What is a code? Just what does that mean? A code. Do you have a microphone? Can you? Well, but we need you to have one, because when you talk, they can't hear you
Thank you.
out in the world. Okay. All righty. Did you have something to say?
I kind of think of a code as like a kind of like when you have like a board meeting and you have these rules of communication
That's a good
laid
way to put it.
down, and that's kind of like the code. You're allowed to speak freely, but we're not
Respectfully,
going to use
usually.
vulgar language.
There you go.
Code. There's just a code to it.
Okay. So it's like a framework that frames our behavior in certain situations, isn't it? Okay. So that our framework of the foundation, the 10 words, there needed to be further instruction on that, didn't it? We are talking about a group of people who had come out of slavery. They had lived in Egypt for 400 years or thereabouts, and they had been slaves. Slaves don't have much choice, do they? They do what they're told, and if they don't, there's punishment, and often very harsh punishment. So, do you think they truly understood a God of love? What kind of ruler had they been under?
Dictator, I guess.
A dictator, very harsh. And so, would they have understood the language God was speaking and what it was talking about? Did you want to say something? I see it hesitating.
Yeah. Just like in Rome, where Caesar was considered a god, Pharaoh was too. And of all the other gods, the living Pharaoh had the last word. Mm-hmm. And now could not be described as a benevolent despot.
No.
It was all for him. It was all whatever. And we see that starting in Exodus 1, where, the character is revealed. Mm-hmm. Character is revealed in hard times.
Yes.
And so they had no clue. I mean, I don't think they even understood the concept of love outside the family. And now all of a sudden you have a God who is different from anything or everything for 400 years. It doesn't matter that they knew the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because the way Moses refers to them, those had to be prominent names. They had to have been told, generation after generation. But they didn't know this God. And he had to reestablish himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for whom you are named. And he just made it as simple as he possibly could. Yeah. You don't take people. There's this more than one story. One story I heard over in Africa. These businessmen, and they were Christian group of businessmen. They had the opportunity to buy this whole village that were slaves, and so the people of the village, they figured, well, we're just one slave owner buying us from another slave owner. They had no concept of what to do with freedom. They had no concept of freedom. They did not know what that was. And so what do you do with well over 1 million, possibly 2 million people that have nothing in their background to refer to other than one side or the other of slavery and all of these numerous gods that you weren't sure if they were, what side of the bed they got up on today. And so God has to be very precise, but he has to be very limited. Otherwise, they'll quit paying attention.
Yes.
The slavery, they were Egypt, they were, saturated in heathenism and pagan principles and teachings that I believe it was very hard for them to understand the Ten Commandments and connect it to love. That would be hard for them to do because we understand that in our days, the first 4 is love for God. The next 6 is love for your fellow man. But that's part of the code. It goes far-reaching into the principles there. There's the basic, and then you have building blocks off of that. And I think it would be very hard for them under their condition to make that connection.
Yep.
They struggled with it, I'm sure.
One of the things that, as I was in school myself many years ago, as well as while I was teaching, one of the things that was really stressed to me as a student, and then I continued to express that, is if you don't know what you're heading towards, you are not going to get there. Right? So what does that have to do with laws? The 10 words are what? God's character of love, right? It's a roadmap, yes. But if you don't know what that roadmap looks like in the end, can you get there? If you're just going about life and not thinking about what you want in the future or where you're going to end up, and then you get older and you go, well, I could have been, wonder why I'm not. It doesn't make sense, does it? So, that is what we're talking about today. We've talked about the 10 words. Now, what does that look like in action? Okay? And for me, that helps us understand these rules specifically that we're going to talk about in Exodus. 1, they were for a group of people who had just come out of slavery. And they knew nothing about how to act with love as the principle of the action and the receiving of that, right? And go ahead.
I was going to say, it was a law of liberty.
It was.
And they didn't understand liberty.
Yeah. And often I think because we don't like laws, people don't like laws necessarily, sometimes we don't understand that we live under the 10 commandments, the 10 words of liberty. Liberty. So, let's start looking at some of these regulations. Open up to Exodus 21. We're not going to read the whole chapter by any means, but or verses 1 through 32. So, what were some of the specific regulations that were given regarding the slaves, Hebrew slaves, homicide or murder, and bodily injury? And this is interesting. First of all, verse 1 says, "Now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them." So God is talking to Moses and saying, this is what I want you to tell the children of Israel. So here, I'm going to read verse 2. "If you buy an Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free. He shall go out free for nothing." In other words, he didn't have to pay his way out. "If he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him." You know, look at this. First of all, When we think of slavery today, is there a time limit on it? If you will notice, 6 days shalt thou labor, and the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. This is reflected in this. A day for a year, 6 years, they should labor. The 7th, they go free. I think that's amazing, and that is repeated in several different ways throughout the Old Testament, that 6-to-1 ratio. 6 days, 6 years, and then the 7th, they go free. And here, if he comes in alone, he goes out alone. If he has a wife, when he comes in, that wife goes with him. If the master gave him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and children still belong to the slave master. That's kind of, I think one thing that we need to understand is time period. Joe, did you have something to add there? Because I could use some help.
Well, it comes back to what I said last week. Equality under the law and equal justice under the law. And we don't understand in Bible times whether it was this, which is, approximately 1600 years BC, or at the time of Christ. Yes, there were slaves that were mistreated. There's words in the New Testament, and this applies to it as far as the 6-year thing goes, a bondservant. A bondservant was the manager of what you had. One way or the other, he was paid. And it may have been in, food or, and certainly they provided clothing, they provided a place, et cetera, et cetera. But a bondservant was very close to the master.
Yeah.
The bondservant was like the master is the president, but the bondservant is the CEO. And it wasn't an oppressive system. And so this, compared to what they had been living under, this is really good news.
Yeah.
And to some degree, as far as the 6-year thing, I don't know how many years it was, when this country was being founded, we had things called indentured servants.
Servants, yep.
They came, they had no means to get to the New World. And so they signed up with an existing family, and they said, we will work off our passage, et cetera, et cetera. And after a certain number of years, I mean, they were not treated like slaves. They weren't treated badly. They were well taken care of. And these were housekeepers. They're again, managers, et cetera, et cetera. And after a certain amount of time, they had fulfilled their obligation, and they were free to go start. One of the interesting things, and it goes back here to it also mentioned here, there were a lot of slaves because it was a really good deal. Remember, the prodigal son said, my dad's
slaves are doing better
live
than
better
me.
than I do. That they were free, but they say, you know what?
Yeah.
This is a whole lot better than me fending for myself. Plus the fact that you've been so good to me, why would I want to leave?
Yeah.
And so it's a totally different mindset.
So both of those views are spoken about in this chapter. One, the indentured service status, we call it indentured service, where back then, sometimes they didn't have, people were so poor they didn't have money to feed or take care of a child. And in the best interest of the child as well as the remaining family, it sounds so harsh the way we think of it, but they would sell the child to work off so many years And that sounds terrible, doesn't it? And it's almost, hard to say. But in some ways, that was better for the child as well as the family. Or maybe the mom and dad said, we can live with hardly anything, but our child needs to be fed and grow and learn. And if he was in our home, that wouldn't happen. So the word slave for us is a very harsh word, right? How we've been raised and taught. And I think this was a provision of how to take care of others. I know years ago when we were a bit younger, some of you know that even when we moved back up to Missouri, we had 3 little kids, and eventually the 5 we had in Florida had come up here and live with us for a period of time. Their parents were struggling to care for them in many ways. And we helped out. And we didn't pay for them, but they were part of the family. They were our kids, and they lived with us. They were treated like our kids. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of this. We stepped in for a couple of young families that couldn't physically handle taking care of the kids at that moment in life. And eventually those children all went back to their parent. The other thing you mentioned is that sometimes, and this is stated in here, they had the choice. They could go back. They could say, you know what? I'm going to stay here and be your slave servant forever, because like Joe said, they were being treated so well. And they knew that it was better for them to work there than what they would find if they didn't stay with that one. She asked the question, and I'm not really sure, so someone help me out, that the women, she said the women weren't really free to leave. And I'm not, it's very possible. I know that it said there that, like if the woman came with the man, she could, she would leave with him. I also, one of the things that's kind of hard for us is that this was a completely different society. Women weren't free to come and go at all. So the fact that there was a provision for them to leave with the husband, that it was even there, was a good thing. And yes.
Slaves were considered assets.
Mm-hmm.
And
property.
Like you said, if the man came in with his wife, according to the Bible here,
Mm-hmm.
it says that she could go with him. But if the master gave the slave a wife and she had kids, then the wife and the kids
Still belong to the master.
His assets multiplied.
Mm-hmm.
And the man was still free to go.
Laura?
And if you look at that, God is still working in that because he's trying to teach everybody how not to be a slave. Because for so many years they were slaves, they were conditioned. They didn't understand how not to be that way. And they also, the ones that were taking slaves, didn't know how, the wife might not go, but unless the master said, you're free to go.
And which he could do that at any time.
Right. So God was teaching them how not to have slaves. In the same instance, when you read all of that, it's like Americans do not understand. They do not get it until you go stand in another country. They do not understand what it's like to come back over here, the difference. That's why everybody comes here. When I was over in Japan, just Japan, when I came back over here, I said, oh, thank you, Lord, when I got off the plane. It is so different. You have to learn, and God was teaching all along how not to be a slave and how to not have slaves.
And I'm going to tell a story that my husband has told me. You know, he comes from South Africa, and his grandfather, of course, they were generational South Africans who had, at some point in the background, had immigrated there. But Opa, all he had to do was say, Mama, you've said enough. And she would shut up to his wife. But that wasn't necessarily, huh? Yeah, my husband says, I wouldn't dare. But see, that's America. We have no concept of what it was like 100 years ago. And even in America, we've worked our way out of that because of women's lib and stuff. But it wasn't unusual for that kind of thing to happen. And he didn't have to be mean about it, you know, or anything. My husband said his Opa would go sell the house they were living in, come home and say, Mama, we're moving, pack up. And if she got upset by it, he'd just say, go buy new furniture. And then she was all happy and she could go buy all new furniture for their new house. Understand, that isn't always a bad thing. The Bible tells us who's responsible for the family in the household. Who's going to have to face God in the future when they didn't take care of the family? As spiritual leader, but as well as take care of them financially and, you know, as the best they could. God understands, obviously, if there's issues with that. But, and I say that, and I'm not joking, my husband would have a hard time treating me that way. And he knows that, so he doesn't try. But I do. You know, there's many times I've done something I didn't want to do simply because he did. It's not my place to completely argue with him either. We shouldn't, as husband and wife, argue about things to begin with. We should discuss and go on.
Sometimes I'm trying to put myself in their spot, right? And it wasn't just for the present, but it was for all the ages or all the years from then forward, and they were to be that special people, right? Yeah. But I still trying to think, well, you know, the 12 tribes are all spread out, you know, all around, and how miraculously those people, some were slaves, some were mixed multitude, some maybe had sufficient cattle and property as, you know, slaves over those years. Some did not, obviously. So you had all classes of people, just like you do today.
Yeah.
And just like in all the third world countries and our country, you have the same thing. But it's still kind of remarkable to think about how God in his love was thinking ahead. I want to give you this pattern, this code, these rules to live by, and if you do these things, it will be well with you and those around you. But there's still some kind of confusing parts around it.
Yeah, there is.
And but I'm trying to think how, you know, if there was 600,000 men
when they left,
you can easily go triple or quadruple that with the kids and the wives, and think how far afield all these people were. And some were on board and some weren't. You can just imagine the mumblings and all that. Anyway, it's just a lot to take in.
And because they had all been in slavery, none of them had any knowledge of how to be a leader. Or probably none of them. There might have been a few, but how to be a leader of a free people and how to be free themselves.
Every
Dan?
seventh year, there was a year of Jubilee, the day of Jubilee, when all the debts were forgiven, all the land was given back, to who it belonged to begin with. All the servants had a choice to either leave or stay with their master. If they chose to stay, they put him against the wall and tacked a little hole in their ear with an awl, and that means he was a slave to his master forever because he chose
And by
to be.
choice.
By choice.
It was not a
And
forced
the thing
issue.
of it is, we're all slaves, either to Satan and sin or to God and life.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
And this is something else that reminded me of. Remember that our Bible was translated, the King James Version, the original King James Version, was translated in like 1620. Some of those were a little bit earlier than that. And did the word slave mean exactly what we think of it as today? When the Bible was written, did it necessarily mean the same thing? There are parts of it that definitely were the same, but it is more, the word servant is what I think of.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, Vera, I believe human beings was the first commodity traded worldwide.
There you go. Slavery's been around for thousands of years. It's not new.
Yeah, but as I said before, slaves were a commodity.
Yeah.
They were an asset to be taken care of. They were taken care of, healthy. They had food to eat. They had clothes to wear.
At least in most cases in the beginning.
They were not mistreated. That's where an eye for an eye came from. If the master smote you and knocked out a tooth, hey, he's losing a tooth also, or an eye or whatever. You treat your slaves well. They're part of the family.
As opposed to American slavery, which was a lot different than...
Yeah. American slavery was definitely, and I will tell you today, we still have slavery in the world, and it isn't pretty if you're getting in there. It's as bad or worse than what most of the what happened in America. Yeah. True, what we think of slavery is what we see of today, beginning with slavery in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And then
we just mentioned the King James.
Yes.
Now, that was 200 years before slavery was abolished in England. Mm-hmm. And so the mindset to translate is slavery mentality. When it's talking about slaves, they're going to translate it as per their understanding of slavery. By the way, that's the same harsh slavery that came to this country.
Yep.
They brought that slavery is one of the gifts that we get from
Europe.
from England.
Yep.
When you go back and you take a look at when the Pilgrims came over, they were fleeing the same King James, who had the scripture translation. Yes, and this is just a tidbit of knowledge. Which translation of the scripture did the Pilgrims bring to the New World? And it was not the King James. They brought the Tyndale or they brought the Geneva Bible. They were not going to go along with this guy who had put them in slavery, who had put them in prison, who had beaten them nearly to death because they disagreed with the Church of England. We don't need to look up to that and say this is the only scripture that we, we can use. But the point is, Wilberforce was not even born when this slavery was going on.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came to light was Lincoln was trying to get this country, not necessarily, it didn't start this way, but slavery became the issue because he saw what had gone on in England. And he says, you know what? They got it right and we don't have it right. And that was his Emancipation Proclamation. That is everything that led up to the Civil War. And the only reason that England supported the Union was because it became a slavery issue. Otherwise, they would not have supported the Union.
And Joe, I wanted to ask you a question. Didn't before the British, before England banned slavery, didn't it first get banned in the northern colonies before England banned it? Weren't they the first, like in Connecticut or Massachusetts? Weren't they the first ones to ban it?
Date-wise, I'm not sure because when this when this became a constitutional republic, and the Constitution was voted in 1780 whatever, there were still slaves.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it was still going on. There's nothing in the Constitution against the type of slavery they had. And there again, Xavier's right. In the northern colonies, it was more like the indentured. It was still, they weren't beating them.
Right. They were
not treating
most
them
of it was indentured
like,
service coming over.
Yeah.
Servants.
And not like it was in the South, which didn't want to give that up.
Right. Eston, you had a comment?
Oh, well, I'll keep it brief because
Yes.
we've got a lot more to cover. I
Oh,
think.
we have so much more to
So-
cover, and I'm looking at the time.
Yeah. So it seems like in this time people could put themselves into bond servants or into, if the word slavery was really used in the translation process, they volunteered themselves. I would say most of the time, or at least it appears like. Whereas everything else was, we're taking you. We beat you
Yeah.
in war. We beat you in battles. We're taking you,
As
your
slaves.
people, everything. We're taking you as slaves, and all the way to the New World.
You know, I hadn't thought of it that way. That's a nice way to put it. I agree with it. I just hadn't. You put it in words that really were clear. This wasn't where they go in and take over a country and then remove the best that was there, the spoils of war, and put them into servitude, slavery forever. And I want to move on because there's so much more. And one of the big things is that, as was referenced before, there's laws about how when you borrow or loan money out. And as of today, you know that there's many entities, mostly credit cards for sure, who give a percentage of interest rate that is so high it's considered usury or overcharging. But that's how they make their money.
Or loan sharks.
Loan sharks do the same thing. Right. They're just legal loan sharks. Anyway, but God was here. These laws are really there as protections. So the same thing. If you've borrowed money or a lot of those things, after a period of time, there's a year of Jubilee where all of that is forgiven. If an Israelite had to sell the property outside the family, so their property that was in the Promised Land, if they sold it outside the family, it was to go back to the family in that year of Jubilee. So if you think about that, there were all kinds of protections for those who experienced poor times or times with having nothing, that they couldn't go on and they had to do these things. God said, you can't do that forever. You can do what you need to do to get by, but after a period of time, you're giving it back.
One of the things that surprises me, and there's a lot that surprises me, and I'm not claiming to would have done anything differently, but all of the scriptures that were used, taken out of context, to support slavery, I wonder if anybody ever bothered to read the book, the epistle, the letter that Paul wrote to Philemon.
Yeah.
I mean, that stands slavery on its head.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul even tells him, he says, you know what? You personally owe me a debt, and you need to treat Onesimus like it was me.
Yeah.
And if if our ancestors had taken that to heart, we owe a debt to Christ for our life.
That's right.
And we have no scriptural support for owning another person.
One of the things that I believe and have been told some when I was younger is you are responsible for you. Okay? Period. So in that situation alone, Paul told Onesimus, this is the law of the land. You have to go back. But then he provided for with the letter of rebuke to the owner of Onesimus. So the hard thing is to obey the law of the land and to work to change those laws with proper routes as much as possible, for sure. But we still have to, both of them should have obeyed the law of the land, and one was not to treat anyone in that way, for in the Israelite laws. Yes?
The one thing that we always forget is we were bought for a price.
That's true.
Christ paid a price for us to get us out of slavery from Satan, so he can bring us into his family. And we're basically, like you said, indentured servants. We are slaves to him. But he says, you know, my yoke is light. You know, come to me. You know.
And he also says that we are adopted children. We are not continued to be thought of as servants or slaves. God bought us with the price. So in the technical part of it, we're his slaves. But then he gives us the freedom of a son or daughter. Yes.
This thing about Jubilee
Yes.
and how 7 years things revert back, I was sitting thinking, in a way, that's a built-in buffer for keeping the rich from getting richer and the poorer from getting poorer.
Sort of, yes.
And we've all lost sight of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps the birthright in the family.
That's what it was.
If you are
Yep.
so poor or you came upon such hard times that you had to sell your property, or you had to sell your children or your wife or whatever, that is a guarantee that you will not lose this forever. You will still have a birthright.
Yeah. So let's move on, because there's a whole list of things, and I can tell you we could spend all of the hour or week, yes, on each one of these separately, because there's a lot in there. And not just the slavery issue came up early, but also sex outside of marriage, the usury, the money issue, stealing from people. I mean, these lists in Exodus 20, 21, and 22, they cover life in general, many, many. But when we look back, what was God's original plan? What did he truly want for his people?
Relationship.
Yes, relationship. Have you not had one and I just now noticed it? You're hiding it. Relationship, yes. What type of relationship?
He wanted them to trust in him and his ways, his word. He laid this out and said, freedom is difficult, but if you'll follow this code that we're talking about, that broadens these 10 words, it can make your burden easier, and it will lead you further into more freedom. And Jesus even said that when he sets you free, you'll be free indeed.
And had Israel followed his original plan, would some of those others even have been necessary? He wouldn't have had to give them laws to protect the slave or to protect women. I mean, all throughout here, there are laws that protect women, even though women at that time weren't considered, they were more property at that time. Laura?
The whole thing is about love.
Yes.
If you have God's love and Christ's love in your heart, the rest will happen because you love them. You're not going to mistreat somebody. You're going to find the best way possible to help take care of that person.
Yeah.
And then let that person go when they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Just like when you let your kids leave home finally.
Yeah.
You want their best possible situation for them.
Yeah. I also want to say this. When God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt and into the promised land, so after the 40 years of roaming the desert and they're going into the promised land, his instructions to them were to go in and take over the land, right? But what was their instructions on how to do it?
Oh, to go along with that, I just love about the you know, the spies, and you know, everybody but two gave poor reports. So to me, I got to start right there with those reports and how what the lack of faith, you know, was a big no go or a non-start for what God's kind of initial plan was to take over.
And the base of all of those reports was, we can't do it. We're too weak.
We're grasshoppers.
Did God tell them to go do it themselves?
Did they not have the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire? Did they not have that day by day? I'd like to think we wouldn't have done that, but you know, we probably would have.
Well, and the thing is, they did not have to raise a hand to the Egyptians. God took care of it. They did not have to do anything to get across the Red Sea. God took care of it. What they had to do was move their feet and in faith that God was going to make a way. And that's what God wanted throughout history for the Israelites. He wanted them to let him lead the way and make the way. Were you going to say something, Joe?
How much history do we need? Jericho. They didn't lift a hand. The priest just lifted the trumpet and blew it. And God promised them that they weren't going to have to go in there and defeat, as an army goes in to defeat an enemy. He says, I will drive them out.
Yeah.
And it was brought up in Hope Sabbath School. I'm trying to remember the name of the. Anyway, he was told, yeah, go out to battle, but send the choir in front of you.
Yes. Joshua, are you talking about?
No, that was. Oh, come on, I can't think of his name.
Oh, well,
anyway.
doesn't matter.
One of the kings of Judah, and that happened on more than one time. Gideon. They never raised a sword; they just raised their voices and shouted. We sing a song, praise. That's our praise is the power that brings down the wall of Jericho and everything else. Satan can't stand praise, and as long as we praise and read the Psalms, we're supposed to shout our praise.
Yeah.
And you don't shout in a quiet voice.
No.
You don't blow a trumpet softly. You only blow it loudly. And it is our praise that Satan flees.
Yeah.
Ellen White even says that. So, you know, don't take my words and the words of a song for it.
Yeah.
You know, if you really need to default to Ellen White, go ahead. She says the same thing.
Yeah. And an eye for an eye was mentioned here a minute ago, but did God actually want us that if somebody hit us to hit him back? No. That is not. That was humanity's knee-jerk reaction. I like that too. But it was how they took what he said.
If you read further where it says that, because don't stop reading where it says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. says it in Leviticus, says it in Deuteronomy too. But in Exodus, keep reading, because it says that it isn't necessarily that you go take the person's eye out or their tooth or whatever it is, that you reimburse them. There is a financial, you know, instead of going and taking that person's eye, they pay you back.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, if you're in a fight and you bust somebody's jaw, guess who's going to probably wind up paying the bill at the hospital? I mean, equal justice under the law would say, hey, you caused this problem. Don't live in the state of Missouri and expect that to work, because it doesn't. But that's beside the point.
True. So when we look at this, God was providing a set of rules for that time period that was way better than what the rule of the land was at that time. It was a step in the direction he wanted to go. Was it there completely? No, he wanted the Israelites to completely trust him, do what he told them to do, not because he wanted to be a tyrant, but because he created us, he knows us best, he knows what, one, will save us, and two, he wants us to have the best life we can, even here on earth. And he said in Matthew that if someone takes your coat, give him your shawl also. And that one's a hard one for people. He says, don't retaliate. Vengeance is mine. I'll take care of it. And it may not be today, and it may not be in your lifetime, but at some point that person is going to face God eye to eye, and God will take care of it.
That's a hard one.
It is a very hard one. Been there, done that, you know. Many of the bad things that I've had to go through, though, began because I made a bad decision. One that I knew was not what God wanted me to do. However, we know as Christians, if we're truly following the Lord, there are going to be those that get upset by that. And partly because, whether they know it or not, it's because they feel guilty by their behavior because they see your godly behavior. It isn't about us, it's about God. And if we remember that and ask God to keep showing himself in our life, he'll take care of it. And that was, I can tell you, some things were going on in a church that my husband and I attended some time back. It was not here. And we went to him one time because something had happened. We said, this needs to get taken care of. You need to step in and take care of it. And he looked at us and he says, go home and pray. God will take care of it. And at first we were like, what? You're the pastor. You're supposed to take care of these things. But we went home and prayed. And within 2 weeks, everything that was an issue got switched. Folks, if we let God control our lives, and if we follow his path, these laws will become unnecessary because God lives in us. And you won't be able to look at somebody and not see a son and daughter of Christ, whether they're acting like one or not. You're going to see that that person is God's if they will just allow God in. And that's what we need to see. Here with each other in this sanctuary, we need to have that open understanding. When we look at someone else, we're both children of God. And even if we don't agree on everything, we need to treat each other with respect because we know. But we need to do that outside as well. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today and thank you for being with us. Lord, this is not always an easy lesson. Slavery is always an issue when we begin to talk about it. We know that that is not what you want for any of us, because you bought us with a price so that you could set us free in you. Lord, we love you and we ask you to help us to understand. Help us to see others with your eyes, to forgive ourselves and others when we mess up. Help us to love as you would love, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Pastor Jerry Duvall, and today I am filled with gratitude and I'm filled with excitement as I share with you this incredible journey that our church has embarked upon. God has given us a vision to expand our ministry, not just locally, but globally as well, transforming lives through the projects and programs that He's given us. These initiatives have already made a meaningful impact on many lives, many individuals. And I am thrilled to invite you to be part of this mission as well. We're embarking on an inspirational journey to build a new church home that will expand our ability to fulfill God's mission. This building will include a larger worship space, dedicated children areas, multi-purpose rooms for community programs, a recording room to enhance our online ministry, and a community hub for building relationships locally. This project will be welcoming, empowering, an environment for all. The Youth Rise Church meets every Saturday night to connect with teens and young adults through music, games, and testimonies, providing a safe and engaging way to worship God and to build meaningful relationships. We aim to expand this vibrant ministry to reach more youth and empower them to grow in faith. Our NixaBibleStudy.com is an online platform where people seeking answers can find truth and build a deeper relationship with God. We provide prophetic series and resources like the Sanctuary series to help guide individuals in their spiritual journey. With your support, we can develop more series and expand this ministry to reach even more people. Our refugee program is dedicated to helping Ukrainian refugees resettle successfully by providing driver's license training, bank and insurance classes. And these services empower them to rebuild their lives with hope and stability. We're reaching out to you today because we need your support to continue these impactful ministries and programs. Your generous financial contributions will directly help us complete the new church building and create a welcoming environment for everyone. Expand our Rise Church to engage more youth with the love of Christ. Grow our NixaBibleStudy.com to deliver more life-changing biblical content. Provide personalized assistance to our refugees, giving them the skills to become self-sufficient. In addition to the support, we also welcome you to actively participate in these projects. Serve as a volunteer. Offer your expertise or become an advocate for our mission within the community. Together, let's create a space where faith can flourish and where God's love reaches those who need it most. There are several ways that you can support us. 1, please pray for our mission. 2, visit us online while subscribing to our social media and support us there. 3, if you would like to donate, please follow the link in the description. I really want to take the time to thank you for becoming part of our mission and making it your mission as well. And as we move through this mission, we ask that you share us, that you move us, that you would take wherever you are at in this world and, well, reach out and touch somebody, point them in our direction so that they can find God. Lead each one in your own community as well. I want to thank you again for all your contributions and your time. God bless.